to jump up, people, are you ready? Windies in the land, just put up your hands.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another edition of On Tour. It's the cricket program where we look back at the West Indies and their tour of Bangladesh. I'm Barry Wilkinson. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, it seems that just yesterday, the West Indies were celebrating that fantastic win in the first test, and it's not usual for them to go into a second test with a 1-0 up in the series, but that's the situation at Dhaka. The West Indies, let's have a look at the scorecard. It's test number 2, day 1. A very attritional day of test cricket, to be quite honest. The West Indies finishing the day on 223 for 5 after winning the toss and deciding to bat first. They were led by Nkrumah Bonner, 74 not out, showing that 86 in the first test was no fluke. He batted exceptionally well, lots of powers of concentration, and supporting knocks from Craig Brathwaite quite earlier, along with John Campbell. They actually added 66 for the first wicket. The West Indies were flying at 84 for 1, or they were looking quite set at 84 for 1 at lunch, but then things got very slow after the lunch break. De Silva continues to be consistent. He's unbeaten on 22, and the West Indies 223 for 5 after some 90 overs of what turned out to be a very slow day. So then, let's just dig right into the day. We've got, of course, our star-studded panel, Tino Best, the former Barbados and West Indies fast bowler, our international correspondent, Johnny Barron, and leading cricket commentator, Fazir Mohammed. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Faz, you're the new man on the bus. Let me start with you, first of all. Your thoughts on day 1 with the West Indies, of course, 223 for 5.
Well, what a day to make my debut on this discussion, because the slowest day of cricket ever in test matches at Mirpur. So attritional is putting it mildly, but I think the West Indies did well to recover from that mid-session slump when they lost 3 important wickets, including the last day hero from the first test, Kyle Mayers. And at the end, getting to that 220 odd for 5 is a good position, because it's important that they build on that, though, going into the second day.
Correct. Tino, you had always said that the West Indies, if they get a good start, you have them favourites to go on and score big. That did not happen today because they got that good start. 66 was the first wicket, but then they just weren't able to capitalise upon that. How do you see the day at the end of day 1?
Yeah, it was a slow day, but kind of what happened with Bangladesh batting in the first test. They ended the day on 240 for 5. So West Indies are just about 17 runs behind what they were in the first test. What they were able to do was go on to score 430, and that's what the West Indies to be looking for their middle lower order to do. Nkrumah Bonner looking terrific again. He did say in the press he wanted to be the Punjara of the West Indies, with very big boots to fill. But look, he looks good so far, and he has to go on. He's 74 now, he has to go on and score 150, 160. He has to think big. And if the West Indies can get 350, 400, I think it puts them in a position to compete in this test match.
Johnny Barron, I continue to bounce the conditions upon you because you've covered a lot of cricket there in Bangladesh. I think this time last year you were there for the Afghanistan-Bangladesh series as a commentator. The pitch has not been that bad because we know how the first test pitch played. It was quite even, surprisingly. This one was expected to keep a little lower. Did you find that they had those demons in the pitch and the score reflected how slow the pitch might have played?
I think that's a fair assessment. The raging turners that we saw both when Australia visited and England, where it really spun from the off, we're not going to see that on this occasion. But there was a little bit of turn. It did keep it a little low. You didn't get a great deal of value for your shots as well. So it was very, very hard going. But the key thing from a West Indies point of view is they got into going into day 2 with 5 wickets left. And by the way, no side have ever won the toss at Dhaka and lost.
That's a very important stat. We were going to get to that, but I'm glad you mentioned it. Let me go back to you, Faz, and let's dissect the day now. One of the things, Faz, that, and this is offbeat, this is out of the box. The West Indies are still taking this knee. They're taking the knee, of course, to support the Black Lives Matter movement. We saw all of them take the knee. Even the Bangladeshi players are doing it, and they continue to do it. Do you still see this as necessary? Do you see it as relevant? And if you do, how long do you think that they should continue with this style of support?
I would say that so long as there is racism in our societies and racism in sport in particular and racism in cricket, this should continue. But when you talk about the history of the West Indies, you're talking about the history of slavery, and then at a much lower level, the history of indentureship, which is why I am from the West Indies, which is why you and Tino would be from the West Indies as well. There's a history tied into it, but there's a present tied into it as well. And I think it's disappointing that the ICC has not seen the relevance of it to make it mandatory. And I know some will say, well, what's the point? Nobody really cares. Nobody's taking it on. But just to feed off what Michael Holding said in his really strenuous advocacy of the situation, racism has become normalized, and you see people almost saying, well, what's the big deal? No big evil has been done. But you hear the stories from people how they've been impacted by racism, either openly or covertly, in many different ways. And we saw when the West Indies went to England. England took the knee for the West Indies series, but promptly abandoned it shortly after, which really tells you what they're really thinking. And I think it's imperative for the West Indies of all cricketing nations to continue to take the knee, whether it's taking the knee, whether it's raising the right fist, or some way I think it should be mandatory at international level, at regional level, at all age groups, that from the moment a team from the West Indies in any way, shape or form takes the field, there must be some form of recognition to raise awareness to the continuing issue of racism in sport and wider society.
There's no need to ask anyone else their thoughts on that. Very well put, Fazir Mohammed. Let me bounce to you then, Tino. Fast bowler for fast bowler. The West Indies dropped Kemar Roach. They brought in Azari Joseph. Was that a surprise to you, and was that the right move to change the winning combination?
Not surprised at all, Barry. Stuart Broad has 500 plus wickets, test wickets, and he's on the bench. Kemar, he doesn't look the part. Look, he's lost a lot of pace, but his skill set is still very high. But look, they want to go in with pace. I honestly believe that Dhaka is a surface that you can get wickets on. I remember a few years ago when I toured it, I got 5 wickets for 20 runs, Barry. So they want to go in with the 2 quickest bowlers, and rightfully so. And I don't have a problem with it whatsoever.
So those were the immediate things that happened quite early, the changes to the team. Johnny Barron, we saw again the captain, Craig Brathwaite, from ball 1 with a more positive approach, and he's credited the West Indies batting coach, Monty, for helping him with that more positive approach. And it worked because the West Indies put on 66 for the first wicket. Your thoughts on that opening partnership between John Campbell and, of course, the captain, Craig Brathwaite?
Well, I think it was imperative that West Indies got off to a good start. After that extraordinary performance at Chottagram, then winning the toss at Dhaka, the key thing was not to fluff their lines, and they didn't. And getting up to 84 for 1, I thought was a terrific position. And John Campbell batted very nicely. They both used their feet. And actually, at the beginning, runs came fairly freely. I thought Bangladesh were a little lax with the new ball. Jaya didn't bowl particularly well. He bowled much better in the afternoon. But it set a really positive template for the day ahead.
Fazir, you look at the point and you look at the fact that John Campbell continues to be the kind of cricketer that's getting these little starts, but one half century in 2 years of playing for the West Indies. Do you see him as someone whose continued relevance in the team is being unchallenged because perhaps there's no one there that's knocking on the door? How do you view his play in this West Indies side in his knock yesterday?
Yeah, I think it was disappointing, the manner in which he got out, because the way he reacted and immediately calling for the review suggested in his own mind that he felt he had gotten a bottom edge. And it was in some ways inconclusive, because you could always have that situation where the umpire is wondering if there's a background noise more than the touch onto the bat. So it's disappointing. But as you said correctly, it's in keeping with the manner of his dismissals, where he gets starts and gets out. And you can only sustain that for so long. And it is correct to suggest that there aren't enough players banging on the door to really claim that spot. Shane Mosley had another opportunity, which is fair, to give him a second test, but he failed again. He might have been someone you will be thinking of pushing him up the top of the order, but you've got to get runs. And I think John Campbell is reaching the point now where if he doesn't deliver sooner rather than later, maybe at the start of the next series against Sri Lanka, if it happens based on COVID-19, that he's going to find himself out of the team.
All right, you're watching On Tour. When we come back, we continue to look at the West Indies batsmen. We've got to look at Craig Brathwaite. We also look very closely at Nkrumah Bonner and also how the Bangladeshis indeed bowled. You're watching On Tour on Flow Sports. We'll be right back.
Windies in the land, just put up your hand. It's time to party. Turn it up to the top. It's time to jump up. People, are you ready? Windies in the land, just put up your hand. It's time to.
Welcome back then to On Tour, the West Indies on day one of the Test match in Bangladesh, of course, at Manipur. 223 for 5 after winning the toss and batting. We spoke about John Campbell. We had a look at his innings. The captain, Craig Brathwaite, also getting another good start. Tino Bessie got 47, was looking well set for half century, but then he got out just when perhaps the West Indies should have turned the corner. Your thoughts on Craig Brathwaite as we look at some of the highlights of his innings?
Yeah, a lot positive, a lot more positive for sure. And leading from the front, I'm very impressed with Craig batting in the last 3 innings, I should say. He looks positive, and that's what you want to see from your leader. You want to see a leader putting his hand up and leading from the front. And as he said, he had his batting coaches know. I guess what is being said to him is starting to dwell or settle in his mind. So he's giving props to the batting coach. And look, I've been critical of the batting coach since the England series, the New Zealand series, and the first innings of this Bangladesh series. But obviously, they're big men, and obviously, coaches don't bat for you. And what they're saying can work or it don't work. And Craig Brathwaite so far have proven that it's working for him.
Now, Johnny, you look at when Craig got out, it was 116 for 4. We were looking to see some kind of big partnership. Of course, unfortunately, Kyle Mears didn't get a good start today. The middle wobbled a little bit, but your thoughts on Kyle Mears and how he might have been dismissed, the expectations, of course, as well of his innings. And then Jermaine Blackwood. I'm going to leave Bonner for Fazir Mohammed to critically analyze. But you look at those two, how did they perform considering a little bit of pressure with the 2 quick wickets there after the interval?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bangladesh battled back very nicely in that second session. Just 62 runs were scored, 3 wickets fell. Kyle Mears, of course, coming off the most extraordinary innings arguably, I think that the best innings easily in the 21st century that I've witnessed or seen, and one of the greatest innings of all time. So of course there's going to be expectation coming into this game, and mother cricket often catches up with you, and that's exactly what happened on that occasion. Cricket will always keep your feet on the ground, and Blackwood, well, of course, he's been in terrific form both in New Zealand and in England as well. To average 50 across the last 5 tests. Got a start, but didn't quite go on. And at that stage, I have to say, I really felt that the West Indies might wobble quite considerably, but just 1 wicket in that final session rescued the day for them.
Now, Fazir, 74 for Bonner. He got 86 in the first test. Unfortunately, he did not get his maiden century. He looks well set now. What has been the change and the transition for Nkrumah Bonner and his cricket?
I think time, because remember, he's been playing first-class cricket in the region for about 10 years, and he probably felt that this opportunity would never arise, and he's batting like someone who was desperate to hold on to that position, and all power to him. It's not necessarily the most attractive, but we're talking about Test cricket. You need someone to play that role, and I think he's doing it admirably so far at the very start of his Test career, and it's important that you have someone, and as has been mentioned already, when you have that middle order wobble, and always the fear that the West Indies could collapse in a heap, as we saw in the first innings of the first Test match, when you have someone like an Nkrumah Bonner, you won't fill the ground watching him play, but when you look at the scorecard at the end of the day, you'll be happy he was there.
If I was there, I put it to you, Adrian Barat, Kirk Edwards, Dwayne Smith, they have come about with fantastic innings in their first of Test cricket, and then they just dwindle. How can Kyle Mears keep his feet to the ground after coming from such a tremendous knock to be now, staying in the side and having that level of consistency? What would be your advice to him?
Well, I would suspect that many people are telling him that already. Keep your feet on the ground. And his dismissal today will be a reminder of that, because it could be argued that could have happened at any point in his innings of 210. in winning that test so famously on Sunday. But at the end of the day, he's got to recognize that that was just one innings. The next starts at zero. I know it sounds as a cliche, and it's very difficult because it's easy to get carried away with all that is being said, all the comparisons that will be made. But I think you've just made the right comparison. Check the last 4 or 5 players who've scored hundreds for the West Indies at the start of their test careers and see where they finished. And that should be a salutary lesson to Kyle Mayers as he goes forward.
And Tino, Joshua De Silva has come on to this side and has looked the part. And we've got to have century, of course, in this first test in New Zealand. And he's been looking very consistent. He's settled down. He's batted well. He's only on 22. How important is this stand going to be to take the West Indies beyond 223?
Very important, Barry. To be honest, they need to get over 350. And De Silva got to bring out whatever experience he have and determination to get some runs and build a big partnership with Bonner. I think there are 2 guys who still fighting to secure the plays in the West Indies as well, especially Bonner, where 1 or 2 batsmen coming back into that middle order. So he would be looking to score heavy. With the wicketkeeper in Joshua De Silva, I'm not sure the position with Shane Dorrich, but he'll be looking to make sure that he performs. Because if you look at the cricket over the last 3-4 years, Shane Dorrich has been one of our best batters, and without a doubt. And for him to be bowling out of the cricket right now, I don't know what is his mental state. I wish him all the best. But he doesn't want to be looking to play any cricket. He's not even in the regional Super 50. So this is a wonderful opportunity for Joshua De Silva to continue to put that pressure on Dorrich and score heavy.
Let's add some balance to this, Johnny Barron. Shakib Al Hassan, we have to be honest, he's their best player in terms of best all-rounder. And he didn't really play in that first test. He didn't have a massive role. He played about 25% of the test match. He's not playing in this one. And Bangladesh made a number of changes. How do you assess and rate this Bangladesh bowling lineup, though, if we had to be quite honest with ourselves?
To be honest, I think West Indies across the last sort of test and a half have outbowled Bangladesh. Mehdi Hassan aside with his 4 wickets in that first test, but I thought the fact that Warrican has picked up, I think, 13 wickets in his last 2 tests in Bangladesh, and Cornwall has now picked up 15 wickets in his last 2 test matches in Asia. They bowled really, really well, coupled, of course, with the superb efforts from Shannon Gabriel as well, and I expect him to play a big part in the rest of this test. But to be honest, I think Bangladesh look very, very light without Shakib firing in that side.
And Fazir, with no Shakib, the West Indies will be happy about that. No expert batting and his fantastic bowling, which is extremely crafty. Bangladesh look a little weak to you, Fazir?
Yeah, they've been weakened a bit. Yeah, of course, when you lose someone like Shakib Al Hassan with all of the all-round talents that he brings to the game and the confidence factor as well, when you've got someone who's so experienced, who's been around for so long, it will take a toll. But I'm sure that the West Indies aren't taking anything for granted. The West Indies have been through too many downs to just get carried away with that sensational victory. They've got to work extremely hard to beat this Bangladesh team, because Bangladesh have been stung by that loss. They probably would have taken it for granted, as many West Indians did, that the West Indies would have folded on that final day. And even without a Shakib Al Hassan, I expect to see them fighting all the way through to live up to their name as the Tigers.
Yeah, well said. Very well said. All right, we'll come back on tour. We're going to hear from the players and their thoughts on how the first day of this second test went. You're watching On Tour on FlowSports. We'll be right back.
Windies in the land, just put up your hand. It's time to party. Turn it up to the top. It's time to jump up. People, are you ready? Windies in the land, just put up your hand. It's time to...
Welcome back then to the final segment of On Tour. Just a quick reminder again, the West Indies win the toss, 223 for 5. Well, time to hear from the coaching staff, and we're going to give you a double whammy here. We're going to give you 2 for 1. We've got a West Indian who is now a Bangladeshi. I'm talking about Otis Gibson. He's, of course, the bowling coach of Bangladesh.
Look, all in all, on a pitch that's offering not much for the spinners and obviously not much for the seamers either, we feel, I think 5 wickets is a good return. We would have probably liked maybe 1 more this evening, and then it would be our day. But we feel like having taken 5 wickets on a pretty sluggish pitch is shared day almost.
Did your bowlers do anything better today than you would have required for them to do in that first test?
Look, after the first test, obviously the disappointment of the last day. I think for 4 days we were in control of the game, and apart from that last day, really, where we let ourselves down a little bit with just our discipline. We spoke a lot in the last couple of days leading up to this test match about being a little bit more disciplined and a little bit more patient too. I think obviously when you hear that the pitch is going to be a spinning pitch, you expect to see the ball turning all the time. In Chittagong it did turn some but not all the time, and then again today was the same thing. You know, there's not a lot of balls spinning past the bat and stuff like that, and therefore then the wicket requires us to be very disciplined and patient as well, you know. And today we showed a little bit more patience, but I still think there's a lot more patience required on a pitch like this that's offering not much for the bowlers.
So good then to hear there from Otis Gibson. Let's have a look at how the West Indies players sum up the day.
Did you feel any pressure to follow up your debut 86 with a good performance in this match?
Well, for me, every inning that I play, I put pressure on myself, you know. We get paid to make runs and to be consistent, you know, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
How different is this wicket from the one in Chattogram, and what have you done differently as a batsman?
I think this wicket has a little more bounce, but it's similar. So it's basically the same game plan. Try to play as much ball on the front foot and keep the ball in the V as long as possible.
You managed the Bangladeshi spinners quite well in the last match and again today. Is there a secret to playing against them?
No, there's no secret. As I said before, you know, they're do and don't to play with the spin as much as possible. You know, stay on your front foot because of the nature of the wicket. And I said before, just keep the ball in the V as much as possible.
Do you think we lost too many wickets today?
Well, yeah, there were a few self-dismissal. However, that's the nature of the game. You know, me and Josh is there now, and the others to come. So it's important for us to bat as long as possible.
What do you think would be a good first inning total for the West Indies?
I would believe, you know, anything over 350 and we will take it. You know, I think that's a really good total.
Well, thank you so much. Final thoughts now. Let's start first of all with Tino Best. Tino, the West Indies continue 223 for 5. Bangladesh need 5 wickets to try and limit them to a score of under at least 300. Your thoughts, of course, going into day number 2 of this test match?
I'm looking forward to seeing the West Indies get over 350. Anything below, I think they will put them behind the 8 ball somewhat. So I hope that Nkrumah Bonner come and start from fresh. De Silva as well. They get a big partnership. And I would really like to see Rakeem Cornwall make some runs. He's a better player than what I saw in the first test with Kemar Roach even batting before him in the second inning. So he has a lot to look forward to as well with his batting. So West Indies over 350 will be very, very refreshing, and they put them in the driver's seat somewhat in this test match.
Fazir, can the West Indies get to 350? Can they get to 300?
I think they can, and there are so many variables attached to it. It really depends on how the Bangladeshis come up on the second morning, if the West Indies are as focused as they can. And as Tino said correctly, if you've got players low in the order, Cornwall, Alzari, Joseph, who can make important contributions. So there's a long way to go, and so often it's contextual. Whatever the West Indies get, it depends on how Bangladesh respond, and whether the West Indies fast bowlers can really put the Bangladesh top order under pressure and get the support in the field as well. I think that's very important.
And Johnny Barron, what must Bangladesh do now if we had to be neutral? They need 5 wickets to limit the West Indies.
Well, they can take heart certainly from the fact that they picked up 5 West Indies wickets in the space of 6 runs last time round, and they'll be looking to repeat the dose and try and finish the West Indies off in that first session and take advantage of a pitch that isn't starting to wear. But time will tell. 355 is the average first innings score at Dhaka, and that's what West Indies will be aiming for.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. You have been fantastic. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Of course, play resumes on FlowSports, 11:30 Eastern Caribbean time, and 10:30 if you are in Jamaica or the Cayman Islands. So we look forward to having you. If you can't watch the day's play or the night's play, if you want to call it that, we'll have all the highlights for you right here on Tour. Thanks to Fazir Mohammed, Tino Best, and Johnny Barron. I'm Barry Wilkinson saying goodbye for now.